A new face in Carsely brings more than cider to the Harvest Fayre, and Agatha Raisin soon finds that ambition can turn deadly in the Cotswolds. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. The morning drizzle hung about Carsely like a sulky veil, misting the honeystone cottages and dampening even the chirp of the sparrows. Agatha Raisin stood in her back garden with a cigarette drooping from her lips, glaring at a patch of earth that refused to cooperate. What ought to have been cheerful spring flowers was instead a disgraceful muddle of weeds and dandelions, smirking up at her as if they knew she had no gift for horticulture. "Filthy things," she muttered, prodding one with the toe of her slipper. "If you think I'm crawling about in the muck for you, you're mistaken." Hodge, her cat, stretched himself along the windowsill, tail twitching. His yellow eyes conveyed mild disdain, the look of one who expected his breakfast long before his mistress attempted outdoor labour. Agatha took another drag, exhaling towards the clouds. "You'd be no help either," she told him. "Useless creature. At least you don't criticise my dahlias." At that moment, a bright, confident voice floated over the hedge. "Good morning. Glorious, isn't it?" Agatha stiffened. Few things annoyed her more than morning cheerfulness, particularly when the drizzle was cold enough to ruin a hairstyle. She turned and saw a tall woman in a pale linen smock and spotless Wellingtons marching briskly along the lane. Her blonde hair was twisted up artfully, the sort of style that looked casual only because it had taken half an hour in front of a mirror. "You must be Mrs. Raisin," said the stranger, resting manicured hands on the gate. "Lucinda Pettifer. I've just bought Appletree Farm. You'll know it. Place had rather gone to seed." "Like everything else around here," said Agatha coolly. Lucinda gave a small musical laugh. "Well, not for long. I'm launching an artisanal cider business in time for the Carsely Harvest Fayre. From blossom to bottle, that's my slogan. Real Cotswold authenticity." Agatha stubbed out her cigarette on the gatepost. "How lovely for you," she said, meaning the opposite. Lucinda didn't notice. She beamed. "You'll have to come and taste the first batch. We're having a little sampling for the village committee this afternoon. Do bring your husband." "Ex-husband," said Agatha crisply, "and I doubt he's interested in cider." "Oh," said Lucinda, blinking prettily. "Still, it's always good to support local ventures, isn't it? You know, proper country living." Agatha watched her stride away, linen smock swaying. Something about that woman's breezy self-assurance grated worse than unripe fruit. Proper country living indeed, as if Agatha hadn't survived Carsely gossip, murderers, and several of her own romantic fiascos. By lunchtime, the entire village knew of Lucinda Pettifer's grand plans. At the Red Lion, Doris Simpson recited every detail to the regulars. "Organic apples only," Doris announced proudly, as if she herself had planted them. "And she's having barrels delivered from France, the posh sort with taps." "Trust a Londoner to overdo it," muttered Agatha, who had come in ostensibly for a ploughman's lunch but mainly for information. "What's wrong with a jug and a bit of elbow grease?" "She's charming, mind," said Mrs. Bloxby, ever the peacemaker, very enthusiastic. Agatha gave her a sidelong look. "You like her, do you?" "Well, she did offer to sponsor the church roof fund. That's rather generous." "Generous with whose money, I wonder?" Agatha said, swirling her gin and tonic. Her remark drew a chuckle from a man at the next table. He was lean, glossy-haired, and wore a leather jacket that looked too expensive for Carsely. "She's generous with mine, half the time," he said. "Miles Cribb. I'm Lucinda's partner. We're in cider. And love, of course." Agatha felt the spark of battle. "Business and pleasure seldom mix. You'll learn." "Oh, I don't know." He smiled lazily. "She's got a marvellous instinct for what sells. Pretty women always do. She's the genuine rustic article." "Rustic?" Agatha repeated, her voice sharpening. "Well, you know what I mean. All country charm and homemade jam. Not the type to live off ready meals and cigarettes." Doris sucked in her breath. Mrs. Bloxby blushed. Agatha, eyes glittering, set down her glass with enough force to rattle the coasters. "Some of us prefer nicotine to nonsense," she said. "And as for cider, I could brew a better batch myself." "You?" Miles laughed outright. "Wouldn't know an apple from a pear." The words landed like a slap. Laughter rippled through the pub, and even Mrs. Bloxby's sympathetic smile couldn't mend Agatha's pride. "We'll see about that," Agatha said, rising with dignity. "We'll just see." She left the Red Lion to a chorus of amused whispers, her heels clicking like small gunshots on the pavement. Back home, she slammed the door, startling Hodge from his nap. "Mock me, will they?" she muttered. "We'll see who laughs when I win the blasted fair." The kitchen counter still held an abandoned cookbook open to quick country preserves. She eyed it with suspicion, poured herself a gin instead, and switched on the radio. The local news burbled about the upcoming Harvest Fayre, praising new entrepreneurial spirit in the village. Lucinda's name came up twice. "Entrepreneurial spirit, my foot," Agatha said aloud. "Show-off spirit, more like." The telephone rang. Roy Silver, her old London colleague. "Aggie, heard the country's gone mad for cider." "You keep your sarcasm to yourself, Roy," she snapped. "I'm entering that competition. If some over-groomed blonde thinks she can swan in here and outshine me, she's got another thing coming." "You? Making cider?" Roy's laughter tinkled down the line. "Darling, you'll poison half the Cotswolds." "Goodbye, Roy." She slammed the receiver down but couldn't help the faint twitch of amusement tugging at her lips. Outside, the drizzle thickened into proper rain. She drew the curtains and sat at her desk with the Evesham Echo, flipping through the classifieds. Between a listing for second-hand garden tools and a notice about ferret vaccinations, something caught her eye. For sale, vintage cider press. Excellent condition, reasonable offer accepted. She tapped the ad with a triumphant finger. "Perfect," she murmured. "A real press for a real woman." Hodge meowed, unimpressed. "Don't sneer," Agatha told him. "I'll show them rustic authenticity if it kills me." He yawned, curling back into sleep. Agatha fetched a notebook and scribbled Project Cider Victory at the top. Underneath she wrote, 1. Acquire press. 2. Acquire apples. 3. Acquire know-how. The third item gave her pause. She'd once tried making elderflower wine and nearly lost the curtains to an explosion. But determination, fueled by humiliation, was her strongest skill. She imagined herself at the fair, smiling modestly as the judges sipped her brew, Lucinda's smirk curdling beside her. It was a delicious thought. Rain pattered harder. She lit another cigarette, the smoke curling in lazy wreaths towards the ceiling. "They'll all see," she said aloud, voice firm. "Agatha Raisin can do anything she puts her mind to." Then, with a wry glance at the muddy garden, she added, "Well, almost anything." The phone rang again. She ignored it. Outside, a faint breeze shook the apple blossoms in next door's garden, scattering pale petals across the damp lawn. They landed on her doorstep like confetti, a teasing omen. Agatha drew the curtains wider, her reflection sharp in the glass. Strong features, tired eyes, the ghost of an old London ambition behind them. "Rustic authenticity," she murmured with a sniff. "Let's see who ends up authentic when the cider starts to flow." She flicked ash into the saucer, reached for the echo again, and dialed the number under the advertisement. "Yes," she said briskly into the receiver. "About that cider press, you still have it? Good, I'll take it." There was satisfaction in the decision, the sort that only came from reckless resolve. As she hung up, Hodge leapt onto the table, knocking over the ashtray. Agatha sighed, brushing away the mess. "You may laugh, my furry friend," she said, "but this village won't." Outside, the rain eased into a silver mist. The petals on the path gleamed faintly, and somewhere far off the church bells chimed the hour, quietly, as if blessing the beginning of her next folly. Agatha smiled, lighting one final cigarette before bed. "Here's to revenge," she murmured, "and to cider." Hodge purred, unimpressed but companionable, and the smoke curled upwards into the soft, uncertain light of evening. A thin film of drizzle lay across the village, softening its edges into a polite blur. Carsely looked as though it had been dusted in melancholy, but inside Agatha Raisin's cottage the mood was far from gentle. "Roy, stop!" Agatha's voice cracked like a whip. "You're splattering it all over the cupboards." Roy Silver, dressed in an expensive linen shirt quite unsuited to manual labour, looked down at the apple pulp now decorating his sleeve. "Darling, I'm an artiste, not a farmhand. This is barbaric." "It's cider," Agatha snapped. "You can't get more rustic than that." They were standing ankle-deep in chaos. Apples, bought wholesale from a bewildered greengrocer in Evesham, covered the kitchen counter in bruised heaps. The newly acquired cider press, allegedly vintage, but looking more like a relic from Cromwell's time, sat menacingly in the middle of the floor. A stream of sticky juice ran towards the door, accompanied by the faint hum of angry wasps. "Aggie, my shoes are sticking to the floor," Roy groaned. "Do you realize this could ruin suede?" "They're loafers," said Agatha. "You shouldn't wear suede to a cider operation. Honestly, Roy, use your brain." He sighed and peered into the press. "It's all very country chic, but what does this sludge do now?" "It ferments," she said, consulting a handwritten note from an elderly man in Evesham who'd sold her the press. "We bottle it, wait, and voila, award-winning cider." "Or mass poisoning," Roy murmured. Agatha glared. "You're supposed to be my creative director. Make yourself useful. We need a name for the stall at the Harvest Fayre, something rustic and sophisticated." Roy leaned against the counter, smirking. "How about Raisin Spirits? It's witty and vaguely threatening." "Don't be ridiculous," said Agatha, though she secretly liked it. "We'll call it Agatha's Orchard. Sounds homey." "But you haven't got an orchard." "Details," she said airily. "Now stop complaining and hand me that bucket." The bucket tipped. The bucket slipped. The bucket emptied itself heroically across the kitchen floor. For a moment there was silence. Sticky, apple-scented silence, broken only by Hodge's disgusted meow from the windowsill. "Oh, marvellous," Roy muttered. "Now we've got cider soup." Agatha's face was flushed, whether from effort or humiliation she wasn't sure. She seized a mop and jabbed at the puddle. "You can wipe that smirk off your face. Plenty of geniuses had messy starts." "Name one who smelled of fermenting fruit," said Roy. Before Agatha could reply, the doorbell rang. She froze, mop in hand. "That'll be Mrs. Bloxby. For heaven's sake, don't let her see this disaster." But Mrs. Bloxby, ever punctual and serenely kind, was already stepping into the hall. "Good morning, Mrs. Raisin." "Oh, my." Her gaze swept over the carnage, landing finally on Hodge, who was licking cider from his paw. "It's a work in progress," said Agatha defensively. "I'm perfecting my craft." Mrs. Bloxby's lips twitched. "Of course. And what a delightful aroma. So very pungent." Roy burst out laughing, earning a glare from Agatha sharp enough to curdle milk. "Would you care for tea?" Agatha asked stiffly. "I wouldn't dream of interrupting your, experiment," said Mrs. Bloxby, stepping carefully around the sticky floor. "I merely came to remind you that Lucinda Pettifer's cider preview is this afternoon. The vicar and I have been invited. It might be instructive." Agatha's jaw set. "Instructive for whom?" "For everyone, I imagine," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "Do come along, Mrs. Raisin. It would be a pity if people thought you were avoiding her." That was the final straw. Avoid Lucinda Pettifer? Never. By 4 o'clock, Agatha and Roy, having mopped, scrubbed and disguised the cider stains with lavender air freshener, arrived at Appletree Farm. The transformation was astonishing. What had once been a neglected property now glowed with tasteful ambition. Gleaming barrels stacked beneath bunting, trestle tables laden with artisan snacks, and Lucinda herself, radiant in cream linen, receiving guests as though born to the manor. "Aggie," whispered Roy, "she's got matching napkins." "Matching?" Agatha smiled tightly. "Probably ironed them herself. Some people have too much time." Lucinda floated over, her face wreathed in false sweetness. "Agatha, so glad you could come. And Mr. Silver, isn't it? Lovely to see city folk embracing the countryside." "We're very adaptable," said Roy, adjusting his cuffs. "One does try," Lucinda laughed. "Do have some cider. Freshly pressed this morning by Miles himself." Miles Cribb stood by the barrels, looking pleased with himself and faintly smug. "Real craft, Mrs. Raisin," he said, pouring her a glass. "Nothing like the genuine article." Agatha took a sip and nearly choked. It was pleasant enough, but the sweetness felt contrived, more perfume than fruit. She said noncommittally. "You can taste the effort." Roy coughed to hide a snort. Lucinda turned to greet new arrivals, leaving Agatha to wander. The converted cider cellar was open for viewing, a series of arched stone vaults below the farmhouse, lit with fairy lights. The air down there was cool and sharp, tinged with something less pleasant beneath the apple scent. Agatha wrinkled her nose. "Smells like a chemistry set." "You're not supposed to be down here," said a voice behind her. Miles had followed, holding a clipboard. His smile was tight. "Just admiring your setup," she said, feigning innocence. Lovely place for a murder if you think about it. That's an odd thing to say, he replied, frown deepening. Occupational hazard, said Agatha lightly. You know me, always thinking about corpses. He didn't laugh. She noticed a half-hidden drum in the corner, marked with a faded hazard symbol. Before she could ask, another voice echoed down the stairs. You've got nerve, Crib. A stocky man in muddy boots appeared, face flushed with anger. You still owe me for those Bramleys, and I'm not waiting another week. Now, Harold, Miles began soothingly, but Harold jabbed a finger at him. You said payment on delivery. I've got bills too, you know. Lucinda's voice floated down the stairs, falsely bright. Gentlemen, please, not in front of guests. The two men glared at each other until Harold stomped off. Miles turned to Agatha, muttering, Local suppliers, always drama. So I see, said Agatha, her curiosity piqued. Back in the courtyard, Roy was charming a cluster of elderly ladies with stories of London glamour. Agatha joined him, still distracted by that odd chemical tang from the cellar. Well, Roy asked, what's the verdict? Too perfect, she said. Everything smells of money, or cover-up. You're imagining things, he said cheerfully, or it's the fumes. As they left, the sky darkened over the Cotswold Hills. Agatha glanced back at the gleaming barrels stacked like soldiers and felt a shiver she couldn't quite name. You mark my words, Roy, she said. Something's off about that place. All that sweetness is hiding something sour. He grinned. Darling, in the countryside, everything's hiding something. She smiled despite herself. Back home, Hodge greeted them with a disdainful flick of his tail. Agatha poured a gin, the scent of apples still clinging faintly to her clothes. Chemical cider, she murmured, lighting a cigarette. There's a headline in that somewhere. Hodge leapt onto the armchair, curling into sleep as the rain began again, soft, persistent, and faintly conspiratorial. Carsely awoke to a morning that smelt faintly of damp grass and competition. Bunting sagged between the trees on the green. The brass band was warming up in wobbly fragments of land of hope and glory, and the village WI had already colonized the best tables near the tea tent. It was the day of the Carsely Harvest Fayre, and Agatha Raisin for once felt almost patriotic. Her cider stall, however, did not inspire similar pride. The sign Roy Silver had painted, Agatha's Orchard, a taste of tradition, was starting to peel at the corners, and the one jar she had upended as decoration had begun to leak slowly over the gingham cloth. Agatha surveyed her display with arms crossed. It looks rustic, she said, trying to convince herself. It looks diseased, Roy replied. Are we sure it's meant to be that colour? It's natural, snapped Agatha. That's the point. You think Lucinda Pettifer's lot colour theirs with fairy dust? Roy sniffed a sample cup suspiciously. If this is the taste of tradition, darling, tradition can keep it. Agatha slapped his hand away. You're supposed to hand them out, not insult them. Smile at the customers. Look approachable. Me? I'm from London, said Roy. Approachable is for people who shop at farm markets. The crowd thickened. Children shrieked near the tombola. Mrs. Bloxby's vicarage scones were doing brisk trade, and from across the green, Lucinda's cider display glimmered like an advert. Her stall featured polished oak barrels, embroidered aprons, and Miles Cribb himself charming a trio of middle-aged ladies. Agatha glared. He's playing the country gentleman, that one. Bet he's never milked anything more demanding than a parking meter. He's got charisma, said Roy. That sells. So does scandal, said Agatha darkly. The competition for best local produce was due at noon, and by 11 Lucinda's stall had drawn most of the village. Agatha managed to coax a few reluctant tasters, including Doris Simpson, who took a sip and hesitated. Well, demanded Agatha. Doris pursed her lips. It has character. Character? Strong character, sort of assertive. Meaning vile, said Roy under his breath. Agatha pretended not to hear. It's a matter of taste, she said. So's Marmite, said Roy. Mrs. Bloxby appeared, looking cool despite the humidity. It's all very exciting, isn't it? She said kindly. I do hope you're enjoying yourself, Mrs. Raisin. Enjoying myself? I've had bees in my cider, my shoes are sticking to the grass, and half the village thinks Lucinda's the Virgin Mary of apples. She's certainly been industrious, Mrs. Bloxby said, glancing at the gleaming barrels, and generous. She's promised a portion of the proceeds to the parish roof fund. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Charity. the last refuge of the ambitious. The judging began under a white marquee. The brass band stumbled into tune again, and a faint smell of fried onions drifted across the green. Agatha poured a final round of samples, steeling herself. Lucinda and Miles stood arm in arm by their stall as the committee approached. Lucinda's laughter carried across the air like bells. Agatha, arms folded, muttered to Roy, "If they give her another ribbon, I'll strangle her with it." Then came the commotion. A sudden shout, a crash of glasses, and Miles Cribb staggered backward from his stool, clutching at his throat. His face turned a dreadful grey-pink, eyes bulging. The crowd froze for a heartbeat before panic erupted. Someone screamed. Lucinda caught his arm, but he crumpled, knocking over a display of bottles. Cider poured onto the grass, frothing pale gold. "Ambulance!" someone shouted. "Get an ambulance!" Agatha was already pushing through the crowd. "Make room! Give him air!" But it was clear within moments that Miles wasn't breathing. The paramedics, arriving from Mercester 15 minutes later, could only confirm what everyone already sensed. Lucinda stood pale and trembling, her cream linen streaked with spilled cider. He just drank." She gestured helplessly at the overturned glass. Agatha's gaze followed the gesture. The dregs foamed faintly at the edges, an odd, bitter scent cutting through the sweetness of apple. She frowned. "That doesn't smell right." "Agatha," hissed Roy, tugging her sleeve, "don't sniff the evidence." "Nonsense, it's probably gone off." But she stepped back quickly all the same. The crowd thickened, whispering in urgent ripples. Doris Simpson murmured to Mrs. Bloxby that it might be a heart thing, while one of the WI ladies declared loudly that Miles had looked peaky for days. Agatha noticed Lucinda dart a look at the barrels, then at the press tent where the judges were conferring. "Stay calm," Mrs. Bloxby murmured, ever composed. "There'll be answers soon enough." "Answers my foot," said Agatha. "Someone poisoned him." Roy gasped. "Aggie, you can't just—" "Oh, can't I? Look at the glass. Look at the colour of that cider. That's not natural." Before she could say more, a familiar voice cut through the hum of gossip. "Mrs. Raisin." Bill Wong strode across the green, notebook already in hand. His expression was professional but not unkind. "I might have guessed you'd be at the centre of things." "Centre of things? I was minding my own stall when that man dropped dead next door." "Yes," said Bill mildly. "And now every gossip in Carsely will think you brewed the fatal batch." Agatha bristled. "You don't actually think—" "No," said Bill. "But I'll have to take samples from all stalls, yours included. Procedure." "Procedure," she repeated, scowling. "And what are you calling this? An accident?" Bill crouched beside the glass, sniffed carefully, then straightened. "No, not an accident." Lucinda, overhearing, gave a broken sob. "He was fine this morning, laughing." "When did he last eat or drink?" Bill asked gently. "Only the cider," she said. "Our cider." The words hung heavily between them. Agatha folded her arms. "Then perhaps your artisanal process needs checking." Roy nudged her hard. "Aggie," he whispered, "show some tact." "Tact is for funerals," she muttered. Bill shot her a look. "Mrs. Raisin, I'd appreciate it if you refrain from detective work until we've got the lab results." "Detective work? Me? I'm merely an observer." "You're a magnet for murder scenes," he said dryly. "I'll have officers take statements. Don't leave Carsely for a few days, all right?" "Where would I go?" said Agatha. "Paris?" He didn't answer. He was already giving instructions to uniformed constables. The brass band, after several false starts, had lapsed into an uneasy silence. By late afternoon, the fair was dismantling under grey skies. The bunting hung limp and rain threatened again. Agatha sat on an upturned crate beside her stall, watching the police cordon off Lucinda's area. Roy fetched her a paper cup of tea, which tasted faintly of soap. "Well," he said, "that's one way to ruin a party." "You don't say." "Think she did it?" Agatha stared at the cider barrel being loaded into a van. "If she did, she's clever. If she didn't, she's in trouble anyway." "And you?" "I'm in it too," she said gloomily. "Carsely will say it was my cider next. Doris Simpson's probably already drafting the gossip column in her head." "At least you've got a knack for these things," Roy said brightly. "Detective work suits you." Agatha lit a cigarette, ignoring the drizzle. "I'd rather it didn't," she said. "It's murder that keeps finding me, not the other way round." Hodge would be waiting at home, probably perched on the windowsill like a silent judge. She imagined his yellow eyes narrowing as she returned smelling of tragedy and cheap tea. Bill approached once more, coat collar turned up against the wind. "Just so you know," he said quietly, "it wasn't natural causes." Agatha met his eyes. "Didn't think so." "Then you'll stay out of it." She smiled faintly. "I'll try, Bill. I truly will." As he walked away, she flicked ash into a puddle and watched the ripples spread. The rain had started again, soft, persistent, and faintly accusing. "A fair to remember," she murmured half to herself, "though I rather wish I could forget it." Hodge, waiting at home, would get his supper. She, however, poured herself a gin. Morning came to Carsely with an air of scandal so thick it might have been bottled and sold at the post office. News of Miles Cribb's death had rippled through the village overnight, and by breakfast time, half the parish had decided precisely who'd done it. The other half was busily inventing new theories. Agatha Raisin, meanwhile, sat in her cottage kitchen with the Evesham Echo spread across the table, Hodge eyeing her from his perch on the dresser. The headline screamed, "Cider Tragedy at Cotswold Fair." "Tragedy?" Agatha snorted. "It's not as if he was royalty." She tapped ash into the saucer beside her mug. "Probably deserved it, the smug toad." Hodge stretched, unimpressed. A knock at the back door interrupted her tirade. Doris Simpson's familiar head appeared, hair still set in last week's curlers. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. Terrible business, that poor Mr. Cribb. Everyone's saying it was food poisoning, from your cider." Agatha's jaw tightened. "That's libel, Doris, and you can tell everyone so. My cider could strip paint, but it wouldn't kill a man." "Of course not," Doris said quickly. "I told them you're not the poisoning type, more the shouting type." Agatha gave her a withering look. "Still," Doris added, lowering her voice, "Mrs. Bloxby said the police think it wasn't natural causes. Imagine, murder right here in Carsely again. It's all very exciting." "Exciting for you, perhaps. For me it's a nightmare," Doris brightened. "You'll get your name in the paper again, though. That'll please you." "Out," said Agatha, pointing to the door. When Doris had gone, Agatha sighed and lit another cigarette. The smoke curled upward in lazy disapproval. "You see, Hodge," she said, "this is what comes of trying to be authentic. It always ends in disaster." The cat blinked, clearly unconcerned. By late morning she decided that hiding at home was undignified. The Red Lion would be teeming with gossip, and if Carsely was going to pick her apart, she preferred to hear it firsthand. The pub was already full of the curious and self-important. The air smelled of beer, wet coats, and self-righteousness. Mrs. Bloxby sat quietly near the fire, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, while a group of locals debated the likely cause of death. "He was allergic to bees, you know," said one, a stout woman from the next village. "I heard he was stung just before he fell." "Bee stings don't make cider fizz," said another. "Well, they say he had enemies, business ones." Agatha cleared her throat loudly. "He also had a mouth too big for his own good." A dozen heads turned. Someone muttered, "There she is," as though the suspect had just entered. Mrs. Bloxby rose with her usual calm. "Come and sit down, Mrs. Raisin. I was just saying how unfair it is that people are gossiping." "Unfair but predictable," Agatha said, sliding into the chair opposite. "They'll hang me before tea time." "Nonsense. Everyone knows you wouldn't poison anyone." "Oh, they don't know that at all," said Agatha dryly. "They think I'd do it with flair." Mrs. Bloxby hid a smile. "I suppose you'll investigate?" "Someone has to. Bill Wong will be bogged down in forms and politeness. I'll get the truth." "Charles Fraith telephoned for you earlier," Mrs. Bloxby added. "He said he's curious to lend a hand." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Charles only lends a hand if it's holding a wineglass." Nevertheless, 20 minutes later, the aristocrat himself appeared in his pale blue convertible, looking irritatingly handsome and entirely unbothered by village tragedy. "Aggie," he called as she approached. "Heard about the excitement. Thought I'd pop over. Couldn't let you have all the fun." "Fun?" she snapped. "A man's dead." "Yes, but you must admit, it livens things up. I brought sandwiches." Agatha opened the passenger door with a sigh. Drive to Appletree Farm. Let's see what the widow, or whatever she was, has to say for herself. Appletree Farm looked oddly subdued in the weak afternoon light. The bunting from the fair still drooped along the fence, the bright colours washed pale by drizzle. Lucinda Pettifer met them at the door, her eyes swollen and red, but her posture composed. "Mrs. Raisin, Lord Fraith, I suppose you've come to gloat." "Don't be ridiculous," said Agatha, pushing past her. "We're concerned citizens. We like to know what's happening in our village." "This isn't your village," Lucinda snapped, "and Miles's death was a terrible accident." "The police don't seem to think so," said Charles, his voice light but his gaze sharp. Lucinda faltered. "They're wrong. Miles wasn't murdered. He had a bee allergy. Everyone knew that." "Did he indeed?" said Agatha. "Odd that nobody saw any bees at the fair." "Perhaps one got trapped in his cider glass." Lucinda's tone was brittle. "Now, if you'll excuse me—" But Agatha was already drifting toward the back of the house, Charles in tow. They found the door to the cider cellar ajar. "Hardly the scene of morning," Charles murmured, sniffing the air. "Smells like nail varnish remover." "And something sharper," Agatha said. "I noticed it yesterday too. Chemical." The cellar was dim, lit only by the spill of daylight from the doorway. Barrels lined the walls, several unlabeled. A slick residue glistened on the stone floor. Agatha crouched and scraped up a crust of white powder with her handkerchief. "Curious," she murmured. "Aggie," Charles said lazily, "you really shouldn't pocket evidence." "I'm not pocketing. I'm examining. It's called observation." "You call it nosiness," he said. Lucinda's voice rang down the stairs. "What are you doing down there? That area's private." Agatha straightened. "Private. Your business partner's been murdered. Privacy went out the window with his last breath." Lucinda's assistant, a young man with a ponytail and the startled look of someone who'd wandered into the wrong film, appeared behind her. "Please don't upset her," he said nervously. "She's been through enough. Miles was like family." "Was he allergic to anything besides the truth?" Agatha asked. The assistant blinked. "He had a severe bee allergy, if that's what you mean. Nearly died last summer when one got into his drink." "Ah, yes," said Charles mildly. "A convenient story making the rounds already." Agatha gave Lucinda a long look. "You don't seem particularly heartbroken." Lucinda's chin lifted. "Grief affects people differently, and I have to think about the business, insurance forms, suppliers, all that." "Insurance already?" "There are practicalities," Lucinda said sharply. "I won't apologize for being organized." Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. It was the sort of organization that smelt faintly of calculation. When they finally left the farm, the drizzle had thickened into rain. Charles raised the hood of his car with a sigh. "Well," he said, "she's either innocent or very good at acting." "Both possibilities irritate me equally," said Agatha. "You really do have a gift for making friends." "At least I don't charm people into submission," she retorted. "You could try it sometime. Might work wonders." Agatha lit a cigarette, ignoring him. "Bee allergy, my foot," she muttered. "That powder smelled nothing like honey. It was sharp, industrial." "So, what now, Inspector Raisin?" "Now I test it," she said. Back in her kitchen, Hodge supervised from his windowsill throne as Agatha assembled her laboratory, a chipped teacup, a glass of water, and the folded handkerchief. "Science at its finest," she muttered. She tipped a pinch of the powder into the water. It fizzed violently, bubbling like a witch's potion. "Well, well," she said, "I've seen that reaction before." A fragment of memory stirred, a glossy advertisement from years ago, promising the ultimate solution to pests. Rat poison, that was it. The very same fizz. She leaned back, cigarette between her fingers, and regarded the cup with satisfaction. "So, Lucinda's cider cellar doubles as a chemistry lab. Typical." Hodge flicked his tail. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not accusing without proof." She paused, then smirked. "But I am suspecting. It's an art form." Outside, the rain eased into a thin mist, turning the windows into silvered glass. Agatha stood there a long moment, watching droplets trace down the pane. "You know, Hodge," she said softly, "I didn't like that man, but I don't like being laughed at either. And someone's laughing at me now." Hodge stretched and yawned, unimpressed as ever. Agatha ground out her cigarette. "Fine. Let them underestimate me. It's always their first mistake." She poured the fizzing mixture down the sink, the water hissing like a secret. "Tomorrow," she told Hodge, "we pay another visit to that farm. With gloves this time." The cat blinked lazily, and the rain tapped its steady rhythm against the window, like applause for a performance just beginning. The morning after her impromptu chemistry experiment dawned cold and bright, that sharp, unsentimental sort of Cotswold sunshine that exposed every flaw. Carsely looked scrubbed clean, yet the village's conscience remained pleasantly grubby. At the post office they were still whispering about Miles' crib. By the time Agatha Raisin stepped out to fetch her paper, she could feel curtains twitch in admiration or suspicion, possibly both. She tugged her coat tight and marched to the Red Lion, where Bill Wong had agreed to meet her for an informal update. Bill rarely used the word informal with anyone but Agatha. Inside, the pub smelled of damp wood and gossip. The fire hissed in mild disapproval. Bill was already seated with a file beside his teacup. "You're late," he said mildly. "A woman has her appearance to maintain," said Agatha, sliding opposite him. "And you'd rather I arrive late than looking like a scarecrow." "You'd look fine either way," said Bill. "Scarecrows tend to attract attention. So do you." Flattery noted. "Now what's the official story?" Bill leaned closer. "The lab confirmed it. Cyanide derivative. Added after fermentation, probably within hours of consumption." Agatha's cigarette paused halfway to her lips. "Post-fermentation? Then it wasn't in the batch at all. It was deliberate." "Yes. Someone tampered with the final serving. Either sabotage or someone meant it for Miles." "Which is it, do you think?" "Too early to say." "That's policeman talk for, 'I know but won't tell you.'" "That's survival talk," said Bill. "And before you ask, yes, we're looking at Lucinda. But we're also looking at others. Money, jealousy, take your pick." Agatha exhaled a ribbon of smoke. "I'll take all three." Bill's smile was weary. "Just don't interfere, Agatha. I mean it." "Me?" She widened her eyes innocently. "I'm merely gathering background for a possible article on cider-making traditions." "And pigs might fly," Bill murmured. He left her with a bill she didn't intend to pay and a head buzzing with possibilities. By midday, Agatha was out in her car, bumping along country lanes lined with yellowing hedges and the occasional startled pheasant. Her mission, the local orchards. A little innocent questioning, she told herself, though she dressed less for subtlety than for conquest. Her tweed skirt was respectable, but the lipstick could have stopped traffic. Her first stop, Hollowbrook Orchard, was run by a broad-shouldered farmer named Peter Canning, whose arms were tanned like well-polished leather. He was exactly the sort of man Agatha believed herself immune to until she wasn't. "Morning," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You lost?" "Hardly," she said crisply. "I'm making inquiries. About cider." "Not the poisoned stuff, I hope," he said with a grin. "You've heard about that?" "Course. Word travels fast when someone gets done in with the local produce." Agatha tried a delicate laugh. "Terrible thing. I'm just curious whether you supplied apples to Apple Tree Farm." "Used to," he said. "Stopped this season. What's her name? Lucinda? Paid late, changed orders, claimed she needed exclusive vintage varieties. I told her to stuff her exclusivity. We do honest fruit here." "So, you'd no dealings with her partner?" "Miles? Smarmy git. Thought the countryside was a backdrop for his London swagger. He owed me for 2 deliveries. Never saw a penny." "Did you threaten him?" Agatha asked sweetly. Peter's brows lifted. "Not unless you count telling him to clear off. Why? You think I did it?" "Certainly not," she said quickly, then added, "unless you did." He laughed. "You're a bold one. Fancy some juice?" She accepted, though the sight of him pouring it made her knees unhelpfully unreliable. As he handed her the glass, his fingers brushed hers. She told herself she'd imagined it. "You're not a bad-looking woman for a detective," he said, half teasing. "Who says I'm a detective?" "You didn't deny it," he said with a grin. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Agatha muttered, taking too large a gulp of cider. It burned sharply. She coughed, eyes watering. Peter chuckled. "Bit strong, that batch." "So I noticed," she wheezed. It was not her most glamorous exit. She drove off red-faced, muttering imprecations about country charm and idiotic hormones. Hodge, she thought, would have been ashamed of her. By late afternoon, she was back in Carsely and in need of sanity. Mrs. Bloxby provided it, as always. The vicar's wife ushered her into the sitting room with a smile that suggested she already knew Agatha had been up to something. "I was just making tea," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Or perhaps you'd prefer gin." "Gin," said Agatha firmly. The day's been educational. When she'd relayed the morning's misadventures, Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "Peter Canning has that effect on several parish ladies. You're in good company." "Company I didn't want," said Agatha. "But he did give me something. Lucinda's reputation for not paying her bills." "That fits," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Do you recall her boutique in London? Lucinda's loft. She sold hand-embroidered scarves and bohemian nonsense. It failed within a year. Agatha blinked. I didn't know she'd lived in London. Oh, yes. Miles financed it, according to someone who knew them both. When it went under, she reinvented herself as a rustic entrepreneur. So, he bankrolled her, and now he's dead. Motive enough. Mrs. Bloxby's expression turned gently reproving. You mustn't leap to conclusions, but you do see why she's desperate to keep Appletree Farm afloat. Agatha sighed. I'd like to say she seems too distraught to be guilty, but I've seen better acting in a toothpaste commercial. Bill will sort it out, said Mrs. Bloxby. Bill's sorting forms, I'm sorting truth. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. Just be careful. Curiosity may be brave, but it's also noisy. That evening, Agatha poured herself a glass of wine and prepared to telephone Roy. She could always count on him for gossip, especially when her leads ran dry. The call connected on the third ring. Aggie, darling, I've been dying to tell you. Guess who I ran into at Harrods? I'm too sober for guessing games. A woman flogging authentic country jam who used to work for Lucinda Pettifer. Apparently, Lucinda was part of a whole movement. Urban fraudsters selling fake rustic brands. Farmhouse fudge made in Finchley. Cotswold cream from Croydon. So, Lucinda's cider might be as organic as battery acid, Agatha mused. Exactly. And Miles handled the money. He wanted to go legitimate. She wanted to stay theatrical. My source said their rows could peel wallpaper. Any mention of insurance? Only that Lucinda insured everything down to her last apple pip. You don't think she... I think she's cleverer than she looks, Agatha said, and that's saying something. Oh, Aggie, said Roy, you always fall for the glamorous villains. Better than falling for farmers, she said grimly. When she hung up, the house felt suddenly too quiet. Outside, drizzle returned, softening the world into half-tones. Hodge sat by the window, tail wrapped around his paws, gazing out as if pondering cosmic futility, or perhaps the lack of dinner. Agatha fetched his bowl. You at least are honest. You'd kill for food, not money. Hodge blinked his golden eyes in agreement. She settled in her armchair, reviewing facts aloud. Cyanide after fermentation, financial motive, failed business, shifty assistant. And yet, she frowned, someone else could be playing her. She's clever, but maybe not clever enough. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a light tap, paper against wood. She froze. Then another sound, the faint scrape of something sliding under the front door. She crossed the room, cigarette in hand, heart ticking faster. On the mat lay a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. She opened it. You're pressing too hard. Drop it. The words were stark, underlined twice. For a long moment, she stood staring. Then she smiled, slowly, grimly, with the satisfaction of someone finally taken seriously. Well, Hodge, she said, it seems I'm popular again. He flicked an ear but didn't move. She held the note to the light, studying the scrawl. Anonymous threats are such a bore, she said. Still, it's nice to be noticed. She tucked the paper into her desk drawer, poured another gin, and looked out into the damp evening. The lane beyond her garden was empty, save for a mist creeping along the hedges. Somewhere, a car door shut softly. Drop it, she repeated under her breath. Not a chance. She raised her glass in a small, ironic toast to the darkness beyond the window. To curiosity, she murmured, and all the trouble it brings. Hodge yawned, unimpressed, and the rain began again, steady, persistent, and promising more secrets to come. The next morning broke with a deceptive gentleness. Sunshine draped itself over Carsely's rooftops, as if the world were determined to look innocent. Agatha Raisin, however, knew better. Murder never paused for fine weather. She sat at her kitchen table, cigarette smouldering in the ashtray, staring at the anonymous note now pinned under her teacup. You're pressing too hard. Drop it. The handwriting was bold and masculine, with a certain self-importance that irritated her more than the threat itself. Hodge blinked at her from his spot on the windowsill, tail neatly curled. Yes, she said. I know. I should give it to Bill. But what's life without a little danger? The cat yawned elaborately. Before she could pursue the thought, the telephone rang. She snatched it up. Mrs. Raisin, came Charles Fraith's smooth, amused drawl. I thought I'd rescue you from boredom. I've been looking at that note you gave me. You have it? You asked me to. Well, Technically, you left it under my port glass last night, but same thing. I compared the handwriting to a few signatures in the visitor log at Appletree Farm. Our culprit has a flair for capital letters. Eddie Burl, delivery driver." "Lucinda's man," said Agatha sharply. "Indeed, and judging by the loops on his D, a personality inclined to deceit. Since when are you an expert in graphology?" "Since this morning. I read a pamphlet in the glove box." Agatha sighed. "Where is this Eddie creature now?" "According to Doris Simpson's grapevine, he's at the cider depot near Mercester. Fancy a drive?" "I don't fancy your driving, but yes. Pick me up in 10 minutes. Charles's vintage convertible arrived exactly 14 minutes later, by which time Agatha had changed her outfit twice and applied lipstick once too often. She climbed in, muttering, "You're late." "Punctuality is vulgar," Charles said cheerfully. "So is frowning this early in the day." The countryside unfurled around them, gold and green under the morning sun. Agatha tried to ignore the pleasure of it. Mysteries, she reminded herself, were not holidays. They found Eddie Burl at the depot, loading crates into a battered van bearing the faded legend Appletree Farm, authentic cider with character. He was a wiry man with a thin face and a guilty air that preceded him by several yards. "Mr. Burl," Agatha called, marching over before Charles could play diplomat. "We need a word." He glanced up, frowning. "Who are you?" "Agatha Raisin. I'm looking into the death of your employer, Miles Cribb." "The police already talked to me," he said, gripping the crate. "Yes, but they didn't get anywhere, did they? I'm more efficient." "You're nosy," he muttered. "Semantics," said Agatha briskly. "Now, I understand you handled deliveries to Appletree Farm. You'd have had access to the cider batches, yes? So, what if I did? So you might know if Miles was fiddling with the ingredients. People say he had a secret recipe." Eddie's eyes darted left, then right. "Look, I don't want trouble." "You already have it," she said. "He's dead." Charles intervened smoothly. "Perhaps you'd feel better if you explained what you mean by secret recipe. We're not here to accuse you, only to clarify." Eddie hesitated. His hands trembled slightly as he set the crate down. "Miles, he wasn't making proper cider. He got hold of some industrial preservative, said it was special yeast enhancer, sold it cheap to other brewers under the table. I told him it wasn't right, but he said it kept the cider fresh longer." "Industrial preservative," said Agatha. "What sort?" "Dunno exactly. Came in barrels marked 'handle with care,' smelt like almonds." Agatha and Charles exchanged a look. "And Lucinda knew?" Agatha asked. Eddie wiped his hands on his overalls. "Course she knew. She said it was his business, not hers. All she cared about was publicity." Agatha's mind ticked rapidly. Almonds, cyanide, the link tightened. "You'll need to come with us," she said briskly. "What for?" "To tell Bill Wong exactly what you've just told me." Eddie stiffened. "No chance. I've got deliveries. Besides, you can't prove nothing." "We'll see about that," she said. Eddie's eyes darted toward his van. Agatha recognized the look. Panic about to bolt. "Don't even think about it," she warned. He thought about it. The engine coughed, caught, and roared. Agatha darted forward, waving her arms. The van lurched, tires squealing on gravel. For a brief, terrifying second, she thought he meant to run her down. She jumped aside, landing inelegantly on her knees as the van sped off, leaving a choking cloud of dust and outrage. "Ow!" she shouted, brushing gravel from her skirt. "That lunatic tried to kill me." Charles was laughing helplessly. "He tried to avoid you. You simply refused to move." "You find that amusing?" "Immensely. Though I'll admit, it was dramatic." Agatha glared. "You're impossible." "Yes, but charming." "Only in your own mirror," she muttered. By the time they returned to Carsely, Bill Wong was waiting on her doorstep, arms folded, expression grim. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" he said. "What have I done now?" "Eddie Burl nearly drove into a parked police car on the Mercester Road. We've been looking for him since. Then I hear you were chasing him down like an amateur bounty hunter." "He was running away. That's what guilty men do." "Or men terrified of you," said Bill. "Why didn't you call me first?" "Because you'd have said no," she said. "Exactly," said Bill. "And now I've got a missing witness, a dangerous chemical, and you in the middle of it." "Don't exaggerate," said Agatha. "I'm perfectly fine. You could have been flattened by that van." "Well, I wasn't." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. Sometimes I think you've got 9 lives. 8, said Agatha, lighting a cigarette. I lost one in Cyprus. That earned a reluctant smile from him. For what it's worth, Bill added, the lab identified traces of bitter almonds in the preservative Miles was selling, same compound found in his bloodstream. Someone used his own dodgy stock against him. Agatha's eyes gleamed. So he was poisoned by his own greed. Delicious irony. Don't get too smug, said Bill. We still don't know who poured it into his drink. Lucinda had motive and access, said Agatha, and a penchant for perfume strong enough to mask anything. Leave it, Agatha. I never do. Bill gave her a resigned look. Just try not to end up in my reports again. He left before she could promise anything insincere. Evening settled over the village, warm and deceptive. Agatha poured herself a gin and sank into her armchair, Hodge curling contentedly beside her. The faint buzz of conversation drifted from the Red Lion across the green, but she felt no urge to join it. She was thinking, always dangerous. Eddie Burl, industrial preservative, almond scent, everything tied back to that cellar. Her thoughts were interrupted by the telephone. She frowned. It was late. Agatha Raisin, she said sharply. Mrs. Raisin, came Mrs. Bloxby's calm voice. I do hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. I was communing with my gin. Then I'll be brief. I've just had a call from the church warden. His son's one of the constables on night patrol. Apparently there's been a break-in at Appletree Farm. Agatha sat up. The cellar? That's what he said. They think someone went straight for the storage vaults. Agatha's pulse quickened. Any idea who? None yet. The police are on their way. And Lucinda? She's the one who reported it. Sounded quite shaken. Agatha felt a shiver, not of fear but exhilaration. A new twist, right on cue. Thank you, Mrs. Bloxby. I might just take a drive up there. Oh, Mrs. Raisin, said the vicar's wife gently. Perhaps wait until morning. Let the police do their work. Morning, said Agatha, already reaching for her coat, is for the faint-hearted. You'll catch a chill, Mrs. Bloxby warned. Agatha smiled into the receiver. I'll catch something all right. She hung up, drained the last of her gin, and grabbed her handbag. Hodge opened one eye as if to comment on her folly. Don't look at me like that, she told him. I'll be back soon. He yawned pointedly and went back to sleep. Outside, the village lay under a thin veil of mist. Agatha locked her door, feeling the cool, damp air cling to her coat. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the faint echo of a siren rose from the Mercester Road. Break-ins, poison, anonymous notes, she murmured, lighting a cigarette as she started her car. You'd think retirement in the countryside would be restful. The engine spluttered, then caught. She smiled grimly at the dark road ahead. Let's see who's playing games in that cider cellar now. The cigarette flared, the smoke curled upward, and Carsely's neat little cottages faded behind her into the night. Agatha did drive to Appletree Farm that night, but police at the gate turned her back, telling her to go home and let them work. The next morning dawned grey and sullen, as if the Cotswolds themselves disapproved of murder. Carsely's rooftops glistened with drizzle, and the hedgerows steamed faintly in the damp. Agatha Raisin, however, was in no mood for poetic observations. She was pacing her cottage, cigarette in one hand, handbag in the other, waiting for Charles Fraith, who was, typically, late. If he's stopping for croissants again, I'll strangle him with his own scarf, she muttered. Hodge flicked an ear, unimpressed. At last, the purr of Charles's vintage convertible sounded outside. Agatha snatched her coat, stomped through the drizzle, and slid into the passenger seat. "Morning, Aggie," he said cheerfully, as though punctuality were a flexible concept invented for lesser mortals. "You said 8:30, it's nearly 9. I was fueling up. With petrol or ego? He grinned. Bit of both. So, Appletree Farm? Obviously. Mrs. Bloxby said the police left at dawn. We'll get there before Lucinda tidies away the evidence. Ah, yes, said Charles, the glamorous widow, or whatever she is. I hope you'll be polite. I'm always polite, Agatha said sharply. To men, perhaps. To women with better hair, less so. Drive, said Agatha. Appletree Farm lay under a low, bruised sky, the drizzle turning its gravel drive into glistening mud. Police tape flapped half-heartedly from the gatepost, but no officer remained on duty. The farmhouse itself looked strangely theatrical, bunting drooping, flower pots toppled, as if the performance had ended and only props remained. Lucinda Pettifer opened the door before they reached it. Her eyes were ringed with sleeplessness, but she was perfectly made up, the picture of tragic elegance. "You shouldn't be here," she said faintly. "The police said the area's clear, but I've had enough of questions." "We're not the police," said Agatha briskly. "We're concerned citizens." "Nosy," murmured Charles. Lucinda ignored him. "I can't think who'd do such a thing. Vandals, perhaps. They broke in through the cellar hatch, smashed barrels, ruined everything." "And yet," said Agatha, stepping past her, "you don't seem terribly distraught." Lucinda's chin lifted. "I've run out of tears. You can't weep over spilt cider forever." "Depends on the vintage," muttered Agatha. The cellar door gaped open at the end of the corridor. The smell hit them first, a sour blend of damp oak, apples, and cleaning fluid. Inside, the floor glistened with water. Shattered barrel staves lay like ribs across the stone. Charles whistled softly. "Someone's done a thorough job, every trace washed away." "Vandals?" said Agatha. "Or someone erasing something inconvenient." Lucinda's lips trembled. "You think I did this?" "I think," said Agatha carefully, "you're a woman with too much pride to admit fear." Lucinda turned away, shoulders stiff. Agatha followed her to the foot of the stairs. For once the mask slipped. "He was going to leave me, you know," Lucinda said quietly. "Miles. After all we'd built. He'd found investors, London ones, and he planned to buy me out. Said I was too emotional for business. Can you imagine?" Agatha hesitated, caught between sympathy and irritation. "Men are fools," she said finally. "He kept everything in his ledger. All our accounts, every sale. I've been trying to find it since he died, but the police took half my files. Perhaps it's better gone." "Unless someone else has it," said Charles gently. "Someone who broke in." Lucinda's eyes flicked to him, softening under the weight of male attention. "You're kind, Lord Fraith. Not like most of them." Agatha's inner temperature dropped 10 degrees. She disliked being invisible, especially to an audience that didn't deserve the spotlight. "We'll need to look around," she said briskly. "If you don't mind." Lucinda hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be upstairs. There's tea in the kitchen." The moment she left, Agatha folded her arms. "You can stop fluttering your lashes now." Charles looked innocent. "Merely putting her at ease." "You were putting yourself at ease." "Jealous, Aggie?" "Of her. Don't be absurd. Her mascara costs more than my weekly shop." "And worth every penny," Charles murmured, inspecting the cellar. Agatha glared at his back, then turned her attention to the wreckage. Something about the destruction was too neat. Every barrel smashed in the same direction, every puddle swept toward the drain. The sort of chaos that required planning. "If this was vandalism," she said, "I'm the Queen of Sheba." "You've got the confidence for it," said Charles. She ignored him. "Look here, this bit of wood, it's splintered from the inside." Charles knelt, peering closer. "So whoever did it wanted it to look like breakage." "Exactly. A stage-managed scene. She's hiding something." He straightened, brushing dust from his sleeve. "Not necessarily, but I do agree something's off. Let's check the beams. Old buildings love to keep secrets." Agatha sighed but followed him, watching as he ran his hand along the low rafters. One beam had a slight gap where a splinter had been pried loose. Charles poked at it with his penknife. A sheet of paper fluttered out, yellowed and folded. "Got you," he said. Agatha snatched it before he could unfold it. "You always take credit. What is it?" They spread it across a clean barrel head. It was part of a ledger page, columns of figures, neat handwriting, and at the bottom a note. "Cash payment." D.S. Agatha's brow furrowed. "D.S.? Doris Simpson? Don't be ridiculous. Doris's idea of crime is forgetting to return a library book." "Then someone wanted us to think it's her," said Charles. "Convenient initials." "Or real ones," Agatha said grimly. "If Doris was mixed up in this, I'll eat my own vanity case." "Careful," he said, smiling. "It's probably leather." She ignored the quip, tucking the page into her handbag. "We'll keep this between us for now. Bill would only confiscate it." "As evidence?" "As leverage. There's a difference." Charles leaned against a pillar, watching her with that infuriatingly lazy amusement. "You know, Aggie, you'd make a marvellous blackmailer." "I'd make a marvellous many things if people listened to me." "We do," he said lightly. "Just selectively." She was about to retort when Lucinda reappeared at the doorway, pale but composed. "Did you find anything?" "Only mess," said Agatha smoothly, "and a smell that could strip wallpaper." Lucinda's shoulders sagged. I don't know how to start again. The insurance will barely cover half the damage. Charles stepped forward, touching her arm with studied tenderness. You'll manage. You're resilient. Agatha watched the gesture with disapproval, sharp enough to cut glass. Yes, Lucinda said faintly, eyes glistening. Perhaps. Thank you, Lord Fraith. You've been very understanding. Always my flaw, he said. Agatha cleared her throat loudly. We should go. The air down here is giving me sinus trouble. Lucinda smiled wanly. Of course. Thank you both. As they emerged into the damp afternoon, Agatha snapped. You might wipe the charm off before we get home. You look like a parody of gallantry. Jealousy doesn't suit you, said Charles. It clashes with your lipstick. You're impossible, she said, though her voice lacked heat. And you're delightful when you're cross. She turned away, muttering, Men, all of you are the same species of nuisance. Back in Carsely, the village was abuzz with the morning's gossip. At the post office, Mrs. Partridge was declaring that Lucinda's cider had been cursed by greed, while two elderly gentlemen at the Red Lion argued whether cyanide came from almonds or apple seeds. Agatha wanted peace. Instead, she found Doris Simpson dusting her mantelpiece uninvited. Honestly, Doris, if you ever break in, leave a note. I nearly called the police. Just keeping things nice, said Doris. I can't abide dust. Oh, and I saw that Lucinda Pettifer in Mercester this morning. Shopping she was. Can you imagine, after all that's happened? Agatha's head snapped up. Shopping? For what? Groceries by the look of it. And perfume. Very expensive stuff. Perfume, Agatha repeated slowly. She's certainly not short of confidence. Doris sniffed. Confidence or conscience? Agatha smiled faintly. You're wasted on housework, Doris. You could run the Foreign Office. Foreign what? Never mind. Make us both tea, will you? While Doris clattered away, Agatha glanced at her handbag, the ledger page hidden within. DS. Still impossible. Still intriguing. When Doris reappeared with the teapot, Agatha studied her face. Kind, open, incurably nosy, but criminal? Never. You're quiet, said Doris, pouring. That usually means trouble. Only for other people, said Agatha. Drink up and tell me if anyone's been loitering about the village lately. Strangers, delivery vans, that sort of thing. Oh, now you mention it. A van was parked by the old Orchard Road last night. Looked abandoned. I thought it might be one of them cider deliveries gone astray. Agatha froze. A van? Blue one, bit dented. I nearly told Bill Wong, but he looked busy. Did it say Apple Tree Farm on the side? Couldn't see in the dark. Agatha stood abruptly. Doris, you're an angel and a nuisance in equal measure. Doris blinked. I beg your pardon? Never mind, I need to make a call. 10 minutes later, the telephone rang back. Agatha snatched it up, half expecting Bill. Instead, Roy Silver's breathless voice filled the receiver. Aggie, you won't believe this. Eddie Burl's van has turned up. Where? Near that disused orchard by Melford-on-Lee. The police found it abandoned. Doors unlocked, engine cold. They think he's done a runner. Or been silenced, said Agatha grimly. Silenced? Oh, don't say things like that, darling. I'll never sleep. Then hang up, she said, and did. She stood for a long moment, the receiver humming in her hand. Outside, dusk was falling. The drizzle had turned to a fine mist that silvered the garden path. Hodge jumped onto the windowsill, watching her with calm detachment. Don't look so smug, she told him. You think I should leave it to the police, don't you? He yawned, stretching languidly. Well, I won't. Someone's lying, and I intend to know who before they tidy away the truth like they did that cellar. She poured herself a gin, lit another cigarette, and stared out into the fading light. Eddie Burl's van, she murmured. DS on a ledger, and a woman who never smudges her mascara. Hodge flicked his tail. Agatha smiled faintly. It's all going pear-shaped, my friend, she said. But then, so am I. The clock ticked, the rain whispered, and somewhere far off, thunder muttered like a warning. The rain began as a whisper, a fine, persistent drizzle that turned the Cotswold lanes slick and secretive. By nightfall, the hedgerows glistened like polished leather, and Carsely's few street lamps cast yellow pools that dissolved into mist. Agatha Raisin, standing at her cottage door in a waterproof that had seen better years, surveyed the gloom with grim determination. It's madness, she muttered, lighting a cigarette. Absolute madness. I should be in bed with Gin and Hodge, not tramping about orchards like a farmhand." Hodge, curled on the armchair, regarded her with half-lidded disdain. The crunch of tyres interrupted her self-pity. Charles's vintage convertible, hood up, miracle of miracles, pulled to a stop. Bill Wong emerged from the passenger seat, sensible in an anorak and police torch in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Raisin," he said, voice calm as ever. "Ready for a little rural adventure?" "Adventure?" she snapped. "It's pouring." "Then we'll be less visible," said Charles cheerfully. "Nature's own camouflage." "Nature can stuff it," said Agatha, but she climbed in. The road to the old orchard wound past silent fields, glistening under moonlit drizzle. Agatha peered through the fogged windscreen, cigarette dangling from her fingers. "Remind me," she said, "why are we following up on this in the middle of the night?" "Because," said Bill, "Eddie Burl's van was found here, and the farmer who owns the land reported movement tonight. Could be wildlife, or our missing driver." "Wildlife rarely drives vans," said Agatha. "Depends where you shop," said Charles. She gave him a sideways glare. "If you get us killed, Fraith, I'll haunt you forever." "You'd make a very vocal ghost. And you'd make a very smug corpse." Bill sighed. "Children, please. We're nearly there." The orchard loomed, a tangle of twisted trees, their branches gleaming wetly. The torches sliced through mist and revealed a scatter of old barrels and a rusting tractor. The scent of apples lingered faintly under the damp earth, pleasant, but touched with rot. "Charming," said Agatha. "If I vanish, tell the papers I died stylishly." They spread out. Rain pattered on leaves. Somewhere an owl hooted, sounding bored. Bill's voice came from the gloom. "Over here!" Agatha hurried toward him, her shoes sinking into mud. Charles followed, grumbling about ruined leather. Bill knelt beside a prone figure half hidden by a fallen barrel. "Eddie Burl," he said quietly. Agatha leaned closer. The man's face was pale under the torchlight, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes fluttered open. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Agatha said, relieved despite herself. "You could have picked a less dramatic spot for a nap." Eddie groaned. "I didn't fall. Someone hit me." Bill crouched beside him. "You remember who?" Eddie blinked, confused. "The deal went bad." She said, "No more payments." Then everything went dark. "She?" said Agatha sharply. "Which she?" Eddie's hand twitched toward the hedge. "The lady with the scarf." "That narrows it down," muttered Agatha. "Easy now," said Bill. "We'll get you to hospital." Eddie groaned again, then slumped as the rain thickened. "He's concussed," Bill said. "Lucky he's alive." Agatha's torch beam swept the hedge where Eddie had pointed. Something pale fluttered against the wire, a scrap of floral fabric snagged on a thorn. She plucked it free. "Well, well," she murmured. "Fashion makes an appearance. Recognize this pattern, Charles." He leaned close. "Looks expensive and familiar." "Lucinda Pettifer's headscarves," said Agatha grimly. "She wore one just like it yesterday, all pink roses and false modesty." "Could have been planted," said Charles. "Or dropped while coshing a man over the head," Agatha retorted. Bill straightened. "We'll see what forensics says. For now, keep it clean." "Too late," said Agatha. "It's covered in mud, like everything else in this blasted county." By the time they got Eddie to the Mercester Hospital, it was past midnight. Agatha was cold, wet, and furious, all her least attractive states. Bill insisted on filing the report while Charles drove her back to Carsely. The lanes were empty. The drizzle had thinned to mist again, curling around the headlights. "You realize," said Charles, "this could finally solve it. If Lucinda attacked him, it ties her to the poison." "It's too tidy," said Agatha. "Real life's never tidy, especially murder." "You'd know." "Meaning what?" "That you've turned investigating into an art form. Even when you promise not to meddle, you meddle anyway." She sniffed. "Well, someone has to. The police move slower than parish gossip." "And yet Bill still talks to you," said Charles, "because he respects me." "Or pities you." Agatha bristled. "You're insufferable. And you love it." "Not tonight," she said curtly. Charles only chuckled. When she finally stepped into her cottage, it was 2:30. Hodge greeted her with a yawn that carried moral superiority. "Don't look at me like that," she said, peeling off her wet coat. "You wouldn't last 10 minutes in that orchard. You'd need a heated litter tray." He flicked his tail and turned his back. Agatha made tea because gin would have been too predictable. She'd just sat down when the phone rang. "Mrs. Raisin," came Mrs. Bloxby's calm, lilting voice, "I do hope I'm not disturbing you." "At this hour, disturbance is relative," said Agatha. "What's wrong?" "I thought you should know. Bill asked me to look at something. He stopped by just now, very apologetic. He found a scarf scrap near the orchard, and he wondered if I recognized the pattern." Agatha sat forward. "And?" "It's Lucinda Pettifer's without question. She buys them from that little boutique in Evesham. All the ladies know. But forgive me, Mrs. Raisin, I can't help feeling it's rather too convenient." Agatha smiled grimly. "Exactly what I thought. Lucinda's many things, but careless isn't one of them." "Then someone planted it?" "Likely, and wanted it found." "Who would do such a thing?" "Someone clever, or desperate," Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "Do take care, Mrs. Raisin. Curiosity is a fine thing, but it does invite retaliation." "If curiosity killed the cat," said Agatha, glancing at Hodge, "the cat should have been quicker." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "Good night, then. Try to sleep." "Sleep?" said Agatha. "After a night like this? Not likely." But she did doze briefly with Hodge purring beside her. The dream was restless. Cider barrels, torn scarves, and someone laughing in the dark. When the telephone rang again, it startled her awake. She fumbled for the receiver. "Yes?" "Sorry to wake you," said Bill's steady voice, though he sounded tired too. "I've just had the lab results from Miles Cribb's drink samples." "And?" "You were right about something being off. The poison didn't come from the cider." Agatha sat up, every nerve alert. "Then what?" "It was the sparkling water. Bottled, fancy brand. Miles and Lucinda were the only ones who drank it that day. Same bottle at their stall. Same toxin." Agatha frowned. So the poison was personal. "Looks that way. Either Lucinda dosed him or someone dosed them both. And only he drank enough to die." "Exactly." She thought for a moment. "That makes Lucinda both victim and suspect. How tidy." "Don't start that again," said Bill wearily. "Just let us handle it." "Of course," she said sweetly. "Which means you won't let us handle it," he sighed. "Good night, Mrs. Raisin." "Good night, Sergeant." She hung up, staring at the phone. Hodge blinked at her from the armchair. "Sparkling water," she murmured. "The kind Lucinda insists on for appearances. Expensive, decorative, deadly." She rose and crossed to the window. The mist outside glowed faintly with moonlight. The village slept under its damp veil, innocent and unknowing. Agatha lit another cigarette. "So someone switched the bottles," she said aloud. "But who? Lucinda wouldn't risk drinking her own poison, unless she didn't know." She blew out a stream of smoke. "The scarf, the ledger, the fancy water, all too neat, Hodge. Someone's polishing this murder like silver." The cat gave a small, questioning trill. Agatha smiled wryly. "No, I don't know who, yet. But they've underestimated me, and that's fatal." Hodge stretched luxuriously and yawned. Yes, she said, stubbing out her cigarette. "You can go back to sleep. Some of us have reputations to maintain." She turned off the lamp. Outside, the drizzle resumed, soft, relentless, and full of secrets. The next morning dawned with deceptive brightness. Carsely glimmered under a pale wash of sunlight that made even the puddles look hopeful. Agatha Raisin, however, was not deceived. The day might look innocent, but it carried the stale taste of unfinished business. She sat at her kitchen table in a dressing gown, cigarette poised, newspaper unopened, mind spinning faster than Hodge's tail when chasing moths. The cat perched on the windowsill, yawning as if to remind her that murder inquiries were tiresome distractions from breakfast. "Don't judge," she told him. "Some of us actually contribute to society." He blinked, unimpressed. Her telephone shrilled. The landline, naturally, no nonsense about mobile phones in Carsely. She snatched it up. "Aggie, darling," came Roy Silver's exuberant voice. "I've just read the Mercester Herald. Poison at the Harvest Fayre. It's practically Shakespearean. Tell me you're in the middle of it." "I'm knee-deep," said Agatha, "and up to my neck in mud and idiots." "So the usual, then. Any suspects?" "Lucinda Pettifer's still flavour of the month, but the evidence stinks of staging. Someone's polishing this murder till it gleams." Said Roy thoughtfully. "Be careful, love. In my experience, people who sparkle usually scratch." "Thank you for the wisdom, Oscar Wilde," said Agatha, hanging up. She stubbed out her cigarette, poured herself another coffee, and stared at the half-written notes she'd scrawled last night. Sparkling water, she'd underlined. Who bought it? Who served it? Who benefited? Then, like a match to kindling, her mind flared. Miles had changed from cider to sparkling water that day. She'd heard him brag about his new, healthy habit. He'd mentioned it at the fair meeting, boasting about some dentist's lecture on acid erosion and protecting enamel. Typical vanity. Even his molars had delusions of grandeur. She grabbed her notebook and car keys. Hodge gave her a slow blink of reproach. "Don't wait up," she told him, "and don't eat my biscuits." The Carsely village hall smelled faintly of floor polish and self-satisfaction. Inside, the Harvest Fayre committee had reconvened for a debrief, which meant gossip under the pretense of efficiency. The bunting still drooped from the beams like tired confetti. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin," called Mr. Jessup, the vicar, in tones suggesting he'd rather face divine judgment. "We were just discussing the tragedy." "Weren't we all?" said Agatha, sweeping in. "Any fresh revelations?" "Only that we'll need a new cider stall next year," said Mrs. Herring from the WI, tutting as if murder were a logistical inconvenience. Agatha ignored her. "Who organised the refreshments, particularly the bottled water?" The group looked blank. Finally, Doris Simpson, polishing a spoon with unnecessary vigour, spoke. "That would have been me, Mrs. Raisin. Lucinda asked if I could fetch the boxes from her cellar that morning. Said she was rushed off her feet." Agatha pounced. "So you handled the bottles?" Doris's eyes widened. "Only carried them to her car. Sealed they were. I swear on my mop handle I never touched a cork." "Relax, Doris," said Agatha. "I'm not accusing you. I'm merely exploring the possibilities." "You've a way of exploring that feels like an interrogation," said Mr. Jessup mildly. "Force of habit," said Agatha. But something in Doris's expression stuck. Guilt or nerves or just the horror of being dragged into scandal. Agatha decided to follow up later, in private. As she left, she heard Mrs. Herring whisper, "That woman can sniff out trouble like a truffle pig." "She'd call that a compliment," muttered someone else. Agatha did. That afternoon, she cornered Doris at the vicarage garden gate, where the cleaner was balancing a feather duster and moral rectitude in equal measure. "Doris, we need a word." "If it's about the vicar's curtains, I've already washed them twice. Not curtains, cider, or rather sparkling water." Doris paled. "I told you I didn't poison no one." "No one said you did," said Agatha, softening slightly. "But you did go into Lucinda's cellar. You saw her workspace. Anything odd?" Doris frowned, thinking. "Well, she had all them fancy bottles lined up, French labels like perfume. Said they were samples for investors. I helped her take some photos, pretending she'd bottled them herself. She even made me hold a basket of apples like some farm girl. I looked daft." Agatha smiled despite herself. "You poor thing. Exploited for artifice." "What's that mean?" "Means you looked authentic," said Agatha. "Oh," said Doris, mollified. "Anyway, that's all I did. I swear I never went near the fair drinks after that." "Lucinda asked you to fetch them that morning." "Yes, but she picked which boxes. Said, 'Take the sparkling, not the still.' Like it mattered." Agatha's mind clicked like a latch closing. "And did she touch them?" "Oh, yes. She checked each bottle before it went in the boot. Said presentation mattered." "Indeed it does," murmured Agatha. Doris bit her lip. "Mrs. Raisin, you don't think—" "I think vanity makes fools of us all," said Agatha, "but some fools are deadlier than others." Later at Mrs. Bloxby's sitting room, a haven of calm where even the wallpaper seemed to sigh in sympathy, Agatha relayed the conversation. The vicar's wife listened, hands folded, expression mild but eyes sharp. "So, Lucinda ensured she handled the bottles personally," Mrs. Bloxby said. "Exactly," said Agatha. "And yet she claims she never touched the drink served to Miles. Convenient amnesia, if you ask me." Mrs. Bloxby nodded thoughtfully. "I've often found, Mrs. Raisin, that people who insist on appearances tend to conceal reality. Vanity breeds deceit. But deceit," she added softly, "never stays bottled." Agatha smiled. "You should write sermons for the Daily Mail. You'd make a fortune." "And you should try humility," said Mrs. Bloxby gently. "One thing at a time." A pause, then Mrs. Bloxby added, "You said you noticed something strange about Lucinda's hands at the fair." "Ah, yes. Perfectly manicured. Not a chip, not a mark. and yet she claims she'd been hauling barrels for hours. I've chipped nails opening crisps. Perhaps she wore gloves. Perhaps, said Agatha slowly, but not if she mixed cyanide. That stuff stains under nails, Bill mentioned it. If she'd handled poison herself, we'd see the marks. But her manicure's immaculate. So she may not have poisoned the cider directly, said Mrs. Bloxby. No, said Agatha, leaning forward, but she could have tampered with the bottles, prepared the deadly one in advance. She's vain enough to avoid mess, but clever enough to fake innocence. Then she's dangerous, said Mrs. Bloxby simply. Which is why, said Agatha, eyes glinting, I'm inviting her to tea. Mrs. Bloxby looked alarmed. Tea? Of course. Women like Lucinda can't resist tea. It's social theatre. I'll make her talk. I always do. Do promise me you'll be careful. Always, said Agatha, lighting another cigarette. You said that before the last explosion at the WI bake sale. That was jam, not dynamite, said Agatha. Entirely different hazard. By late afternoon, she'd made the call. Lucinda accepted instantly, too eagerly. Agatha set the kettle hissing, laid out her least chipped china, and spent 20 irritable minutes fretting over whether her lipstick shade said friendly or formidable. Charles arrived uninvited, as usual, lounging in the doorway. I hear you're having company, he said. Word travels fast. Bill told me. He's stationed in his car down the lane in case you need rescuing. Agatha rolled her eyes. Honestly, it's tea, not trench warfare. You underestimate how lethal your teas can be. If you're staying, make yourself useful. Hodge like sardines. I'm not feeding your cat. Then stay quiet and look decorative, Charles smirked. My best talent. When the knock came, Agatha was ready. Lucinda entered swathed in taupe and self-pity, her hair perfect, her nails gleaming. Mrs. Raisin, she began, with brittle sweetness, thank you for inviting me. It's been a horrid few days. I can imagine, said Agatha smoothly, pouring tea. Milk, sugar, or just regret. Lucinda gave a tremulous laugh. I hear you've been asking questions. I do hope you're not turning this into one of your projects. Only seeking the truth, said Agatha. You've been quite the topic in Carsely. Oh? Your scarf, for instance. Turned up near the orchard. Very dramatic. Lucinda stiffened. I lost it ages ago. Anyone could have taken it. Of course. And Doris Simpson mentioned your Cellar photos. Clever idea. All those rustic shots for investors. Lucinda's smile faltered. I don't see what that has to do with anything. Just admirable initiative, said Agatha lightly. You and Miles made quite the team, until you didn't. I told the police everything. Miles was difficult, controlling, but I'd never hurt him. Naturally, said Agatha, though it is odd. The sparkling water that killed him. You selected those bottles yourself, didn't you? Lucinda's eyes widened. That's absurd. Doris fetched them. On your instruction, said Agatha. You checked each one. Lucinda's composure wavered. I was only making sure they looked right. For presentation. Yes, said Agatha softly. Presentation matters to you, doesn't it? The perfect image, the perfect manicure. Lucinda flinched. What do you mean? Agatha's gaze lingered on her hands. No stains, no cracks. Impressive for a woman who worked the cider press all week. Curious, isn't it? Lucinda drew back, colour rising in her cheeks. Are you implying something? Not at all, said Agatha, voice honey smooth. I'm merely observant. Perhaps the poisoner wore gloves. Perhaps not. Lucinda rose abruptly. This is intolerable. I won't be insulted in my neighbour's cottage. Suit yourself, said Agatha, but you might want to be careful which bottles you drink from on your way home. Lucinda hesitated at the door, then fled into the drizzle. Charles let out a low whistle, subtle as ever. She's hiding something, said Agatha. She cracked when I mentioned the nails. Or she cracked because you were terrifying. Same difference. The telephone rang. Agatha snatched it up. Bill? Yes, I saw her leave. You all right? Perfectly, though she's rattled. Good, because I've got confirmation from the lab. The residue on her manicure samples came back negative. No cyanide trace. Then she didn't mix it herself, said Agatha. No, said Bill, which means she had help. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Or she paid someone. Don't do anything rash, said Bill. Rash is my middle name. It's probably Margaret. She laughed despite herself. Fine, But I'll need you nearby tomorrow. I'm seeing Lucinda again. She's ready to confess something. She just doesn't know it yet." "Be careful, Agatha." "I always am," she said, and hung up before he could argue. Later, when Charles had gone and quiet settled, Agatha sat by the window, Hodge curled like punctuation at her feet. Rain slicked the garden path, turning the world silver. "Vanity breeds deceit," Mrs. Bloxby had said. Agatha took a sip of cooling tea and smiled faintly. "And deceit," she murmured, watching the rain fall, "never stays bottled." Hodge stretched, tail flicking, as if to agree. "Don't worry," she told him softly. "By tomorrow, the cork will pop." The kettle clicked behind her, a domestic reminder that the world went on, even when secrets didn't. The following evening arrived soft and heavy, with drizzle clinging to Carsely's windows like gossip to a parish hall. In Agatha Raisin's cottage, the lamps were low and the sherry was breathing, this time not for a neighbourly chat, but for a planned trap. She surveyed the sitting room one last time. Candles flickered on the mantel, and a tray of dubious cheese straws sat beside the decanter. Hodge snored by the fire, offering no moral support. "You're lucky," she muttered to him. "You get tuna, I get potential homicide." He yawned and turned over. The clock struck 8. A knock followed, polite but precise. Lucinda Pettifer, punctual even under suspicion. Agatha pasted on her best smile, the one that suggested she was friendly but armed. "Mrs. Pettifer, do come in. You look composed." Lucinda glided inside in a cashmere wrap and the faint scent of expensive anxiety. "One does one's best," she said, scanning the cosy scene. "How very charming. I almost envy you, Mrs. Raisin. Such simplicity." "That's one word for it," said Agatha, handing her a glass of sherry. "I've always preferred strategic minimalism. Sit down, won't you? We've much to discuss." Lucinda perched on the edge of the armchair, all poise and porcelain. "I do hope this isn't about that dreadful police business again. Poor Miles." "Yes, poor Miles," interrupted Agatha. "It must be terrible losing a partner and a profit margin at the same time." Lucinda flinched. "I don't appreciate your tone." "Oh, I think you do," said Agatha lightly. "You've built a career on tone, all those rustic brochures, the authentic countrywoman image. Quite a feat, considering you don't let a drop of cider touch your manicure." Lucinda's eyes narrowed. "Are you implying deceit?" "Oh, heavens, no," said Agatha, topping up her glass. "Just admiring your skill. I could never pass as genteel if my life depended on it. I'm too fond of convenience food and truth." For a moment, silence. Rain ticked against the window. Then Lucinda smiled thinly. "You invited me here to provoke me. Is that your strategy?" "Partly," said Agatha, "but mostly I wanted to give you a chance to boast. People always underestimate the power of pride. It loosens tongues faster than gin." Lucinda gave a brittle laugh. "Really, Mrs. Raisin, you sound like a bad detective novel." "And yet here you are," said Agatha, "in my sitting room, sipping my sherry, wondering if I know what batch codes mean." Lucinda's smile faltered. "Batch codes?" "Yes," said Agatha, feigning casualness. "Each bottle of your boutique sparkling water carries one, handy for tracing suppliers, and poison as it happens. Bill Wong tells me the fatal bottle matched the shipment you ordered for your promotional photos. Fascinating coincidence, isn't it?" Lucinda set her glass down with surgical precision. The mask slipped, not all at once, but like silk snagging on a nail. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. "I rarely do," said Agatha. "But the police chemist seems confident. You ordered that batch the week before the fair. You handled those bottles yourself. And Miles, well, Miles drank from the only one that had been tampered with." Lucinda rose, pacing the small room, the candlelight catching the diamond at her throat. "He was unbearable, Mrs. Raisin, always sneering. I built everything, the investors, the image, the charm," and he laughed. "Lucinda and her country cosplay," he called it, said I was a fraud. "Were you?" Lucinda spun round. "Does it matter? The world believes what it's shown. Miles couldn't accept that. He wanted to ruin me." Her voice rose, edged with hysteria. "He said he'd expose every lie, that I was nothing without him." "So you gave him a lesson in authenticity," said Agatha softly. Lucinda's eyes blazed. "He deserved it. Just a taste. I never meant him to die. Only to be ill, to humble him." She stopped, realizing too late the words had escaped. Agatha sighed, the sound half pity, half triumph. You might have stuck to cold shoulders and divorce solicitors. Poison so permanent. You don't understand, whispered Lucinda. He would have destroyed me. I'd have been laughed out of Evesham society. Everything I built was built on lies, finished Agatha. Yes, I noticed. Lucinda's composure shattered. She grabbed the corkscrew from the tray, more gesture than threat, though the candles made it look suitably Gothic. Don't come any closer, she cried. Agatha stayed perfectly still. Lucinda, put that down before you chip a nail. It's brass, not worth the drama. At that moment, the door burst open. Bill Wong and Charles Fraith appeared, one calm, the other mildly entertained. That'll do, Mrs. Pettifer, said Bill firmly. Lucinda froze, then dropped the corkscrew with a clang. Tears streaked her foundation. She confessed, said Agatha, folding her arms, though I doubt you'll get her to repeat it without hair and makeup. Bill gave her a look, equal parts gratitude and exasperation. We heard enough. Thank you for keeping her talking. I wasn't sure you'd come in time, said Agatha. We were outside the whole while, said Charles, though Bill forbade me to peek through the window. Because you'd have made shadow puppets, said Bill. Only to lighten the mood, Charles murmured. Bill guided Lucinda out, speaking softly. The door closed. Silence fell again, broken only by Hodge's indignant yawn. Agatha sank into her chair, suddenly tired. Well, she said, that was theatrical. Charles poured himself a measure of sherry. You were magnificent, positively Shakespearean. She was pathetic, said Agatha, though her tone softened. All that vanity, all that perfume covering panic. Desperation smells sweeter than apples, you know, almost tragic. Charles sat opposite her. You're not going sentimental on me, are you? Hardly. I'm just reflective. There's a fine line between wanting to be admired and wanting to be loved. Lucinda mistook one for the other. And you don't? Agatha shot him a glare. Don't get philosophical, Charles. It doesn't suit you. Neither does humility suit you, he said, smiling. Go home before I find another corkscrew, she muttered. He left laughing, coat collar up against the drizzle. The next morning brought an odd peace to Carsely. The gossip mills had yet to start, though they would by noon. Agatha stood by her kitchen window, watching mist curl over the hedgerows. Hodge sat on the table, poring at her newspaper headline, Cider Widow Confesses in Shocking Scene. They make it sound like I'm the murderer, she grumbled. Local woman lures suspect with sherry and cheese straws. Honestly, it was Brie. The telephone rang. She lifted it with weary suspicion. Aggie! Roy Silver's voice sparkled through. Darling, congratulations. I saw the piece. You're a legend, a rural femme fatale. That's not the term the police used. Never mind them. I've had a stroke of genius. Ready? Never, said Agatha. We launch Raisin's Real Cider, a charity line. We'll bottle it in those adorable rustic jars, slap your face on the label, heroic yet relatable, and donate a portion to crime prevention. It's perfect. Agatha nearly dropped the receiver. Roy, you ghoulish little magpie. A man's dead, not fermented. Exactly. Redemption through commerce. It's practically noble. I can see the slogan now. Taste the truth. Taste something, she muttered. You're deranged. Say you'll think about it. I'll think about throttling you. Love you too, darling, he trilled and hung up. Agatha stared at the phone. Then, despite herself, she laughed. A dry, genuine laugh that startled even Hodge. Well, at least someone profits from murder, she said. Usually it's only the lawyers. Hodge meowed, unimpressed. She leaned down to scratch his head. You're right. I should be content with surviving, and with not being as vain as Lucinda. The cat blinked slowly, as if unconvinced. Oh, hush, said Agatha, lighting a cigarette. We can't all be saints, or even particularly nice. She blew a thin stream of smoke toward the ceiling. Outside, the drizzle eased, and a faint shaft of light broke through the cloud, that half-hearted Cotswold sunshine that promised warmth and delivered damp optimism. Agatha watched it, smiling faintly. Another case closed, Hodge, and another reminder that no one's too refined for poison. He flicked his tail, unimpressed by philosophy. She poured herself a small sherry, just for the toast. To vanity, she said aloud, the root of all murders and most of my wardrobe choices. The clock ticked gently, the fire whispered, and somewhere down the lane a dog barked, Carsely returning to its regular rhythm of ordinary mischief. Agatha leaned back, cigarette in one hand, sherry in the other. The faintest of smirks touched her lips. "Perhaps Raisin's real cider isn't such a bad idea," she said. "With my luck, it might even sell." Hodge gave her a withering look and stretched luxuriously by the fire. All right, she conceded. "Maybe after lunch." Outside, the drizzle began again, soft and familiar, wrapping the village in secrecy once more, as if nothing at all had happened. A few days after Lucinda's arrest dawned grey and listless, as if the Cotswolds themselves were nursing a hangover from all the excitement. Carsely's lanes glistened faintly under drizzle, puddles reflecting sagging bunting that no one had yet bothered to take down. Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table staring at a headline that should have thrilled her, but didn't. Carsely's cider sleuth cracks poison plot. Beneath it was a flattering enough photograph. Her chin lifted, eyes fierce, expression accidentally heroic. Yet the caption beneath it read, "Ex-PR woman's nose for trouble foams over." "Foams over," she muttered. "The idiots think they're witty." Hodge, sitting on the countertop, flicked his tail and regarded her with faint disgust. The cottage smelled faintly of apples, not fresh ones, but the sour ghost of her ill-advised attempt to make Raisin's real cider after Roy's ridiculous suggestion. A sticky residue coated half the kitchen. "Don't look at me like that," she told the cat. It was meant to be symbolic. Community spirit, homemade charm. How was I supposed to know fermentation had a mind of its own? Hodge yawned, unimpressed. Agatha sighed, lighting a cigarette. The smoke mingled with the sweet rot of cider, creating a perfume that would never make it to Harrods. The telephone rang. She snatched it up, half hoping for Bill, half fearing Roy. "Aggie," came the inevitable trill. "Oh, Lord. I saw the papers. You're famous. Again." "Temporarily infamous, more like. Nonsense, public loves you. You're rustic glamour with grit. Oh, and don't forget, if you still want to do the charity cider line, we can spin this beautifully. Justice in a jar." "Roy," said Agatha, deadpan, "if I ever bottle anything again, it'll be you." "Delicious idea. We'll call it Silver Reserve." "Goodbye, Roy." She slammed down the receiver before he could purr another slogan. The silence that followed was almost pleasant, until she noticed the sticky puddle forming under the counter. One of her experimental bottles had leaked overnight. She fetched a rag and began wiping, muttering under her breath about male friends, idiotic reporters, and the curse of ambition. "You try to do something meaningful," she told Hodge, "and you end up scrubbing apple goo." He blinked slowly, as if to say she should have known better. A knock came at the door. "If that's another journalist, I'm moving to Tibet," she said, stubbing out her cigarette. But it wasn't a journalist. Mrs. Bloxby stood on the step, her umbrella glistening and her expression full of quiet sympathy. "Mrs. Raisin, I thought you might appreciate a little comfort food." She held up a neat parcel wrapped in tea towel. The smell of apple and cinnamon floated out, warm and kind. "Apple cake," said Agatha, managing a smile. "You're a saint." "I'm a woman with too many windfalls," said Mrs. Bloxby mildly, stepping inside. Her eyes took in the cider chaos without comment, which in Mrs. Bloxby terms was an act of immense mercy. "So," she said, settling at the table, "Carsely's own sleuth. How does it feel to be famous again?" "Sticky," said Agatha. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "I thought as much." They shared tea and cake, the kind that made the world seem briefly reparable. "You must be proud," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "I suppose," said Agatha. "But fame doesn't taste as nice as it used to. Everyone's talking as if I enjoy all this chaos, as if I'd kill for a headline." "You do have a gift for being at the centre of things," said Mrs. Bloxby kindly. "It's a curse. Half the village thinks I'm dangerous. The other half wants autographs. I can't even buy milk without someone whispering poison behind me." "They'll tire soon enough," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Scandal fades faster than paint in Carsely." "Yes, until next year's fate or murder, whichever comes first." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "You sound weary, Mrs. Raisin. Perhaps it's time to rest. Enjoy your peace for a while." Agatha hesitated. Peace sounded suspiciously like boredom. "Maybe," she said. "But peace doesn't write headlines." "Nor does it stain your floor with cider," said Mrs. Bloxby, eyes twinkling. Agatha laughed then, a genuine, rough-edged laugh that startled even her. "You always win, don't you?" "I don't compete," said Mrs. Bloxby, standing. "That's the trick." When she left, the cottage felt warmer but quieter, like the aftermath of grace. Agatha leaned on the counter, staring at the rain streaking the window. Hodge wound himself around her ankles, tail brushing her leg in forgiveness. All right, she said. "You were right about the cider. Stick to milk, less drama." The door creaked behind her. Charles Fraith leaned in, immaculate as always, the faintest whiff of expensive cologne cutting through the apple-sugar air. My, he said, surveying the kitchen. "It looks as though you hosted a pagan sacrifice." "Close enough," said Agatha. Cider exploded, a fitting end to my fame. "Ah, yes, the famous Raisin vintage. I read about it in the Daily Mail. They called you Britain's most bubbly sleuth." "If I hear one more cider pun, I'll commit an actual murder." Charles grinned. "Then let's change the subject. Dinner tonight?" "With you?" "Naturally. To celebrate your triumph. I promise not to bring any apples." Agatha hesitated. "Depends. Are you paying?" "Of course," said Charles, "though I draw the line at champagne. Too intoxicating for our local legend." "Oh, go away," she said, but she was smiling. He tipped his head in mock salute and departed, his laughter fading down the lane. Agatha stood for a long while after, cigarette poised but unlit. Outside, the mist was rising again, softening the hedgerows, curling over the orchards like memory itself. The world, it seemed, was always equal parts sweet and sour. She finally lit the cigarette. The smoke drifted through the open window, mingling with the faint scent of apples. Hodge jumped onto the windowsill, stretching luxuriously before settling into a satisfied loaf. "Well, Hodge," she said quietly, "another case solved, another mess made." The cat blinked, tail flicking. "Yes," she murmured, exhaling slowly. "Sweet, bitter, and entirely me." Outside, the drizzle thickened to a silver veil, and the orchard beyond blurred into a gentle dream of green and grey. Inside, Agatha watched the smoke twist upward, her own small storm of vanity and victory already fading into the evening mist.